And let me then at this stage welcome a good friend, Nicola Mulder, and she heads up the Computational Biology Division at the University of Cape Town. She is also the PI on the H3A BioNet Consortium, and Nikki is the chair of the training working group within phage. Nikki, I hand over to you now.
Thank you, Alan. So I will just share my slides. Okay. So thanks, Alan. And there was a discussion at the end of the last talk about training. So hopefully this segues nicely into this talk. So we're talking about the aims and progress of the Training and Workforce Development Working Group. So I am just a co-chair, and Duncan McCannell from the CDC is my other co-chair, and I'm presenting on behalf of the working group members. So the vision of this working group is to develop training standards and resources that will help to create a workforce able to effectively implement pathogen surveillance and epidemiology. So we need to design more general, as Alan mentioned, more general, but also domain-specific and customized training on specific topics. And obviously, these could be multiple different pathogens. Right now, SARS-CoV-2 is the focus, but we need to be able to design this training program for multiple different pathogens and for different stakeholders, so different audiences, from your wet lab to your bioinformatician to public health officials and other government officials. And then we also, one of our other remits is to train external stakeholders on some of the standards and outputs of the phage consortium itself, so supporting the phage, the other working groups in phage. So we decided to think about this in terms of different sort of splits. So there's the training audiences and there's the list of topics. And as I said, the training audiences really are quite a big range of people, from those who are running the sequencing machines and doing the extractions, the epidemiologists who are analyzing data, but also designing studies, the bioinformaticians, and bioinformaticians, there's the data crunchers, so those that just process the data off the machines into a usable format, and those that really analyze and interpret the data. Then we have the healthcare workers and allied public health practitioners and the public health officials who really need to understand the use of, for example, next generation sequencing or other methods in pathogen surveillance and monitoring. And then, of course, we also want to be able to develop a trainer workforce. We want to have enough trainers in these different topic areas trained to have a long-term sustainable training program. And then, of course, there'll be genomics researchers that are interested in analyzing data and learning more and getting trained in this area. So the topics here are just shown according to the workflow of an experiment. But there's a sample collection and, incorporating the BioWeb LIMS to show how to use that, how to export data, how to standardize the data and use the standards, for example, from the first talk that were described to make sure that these are disseminated and widely used. So there's a really big data management component from the sample collection all the way through to the endpoint and versioning of data and managing of the analysis results. Then, so there's on the wet lab, there's the RNA extraction, library prep, sequencing, and then there's all the dry lab stuff, which includes data integration. So you've got to integrate that clinical data to be able to really interpret the data that's coming out. And then, of course, to generate reports that are usable by the people who are going to implement policies and implement changes based on this data. And then there are various different things available, like protocols, the sequencing platforms need to be taken into consideration, different tools come and go, and we need to stay sort of at the cutting edge of what is the latest tool for what pathogen. So we had, during one of the phage meetings, we had a brainstorming session in the working group to think about where this group can fit in and what kind of things we can provide. So the first thing is obviously to identify the stakeholders and audiences and to think about the training type and delivery. So some training can be face-to-face, some training can be remote and online. And right now, of course, almost all training has gone virtual. So we sort of thinking about a sort of stakeholder engagement. Once you've got the different audiences that are required to be trained, some of those that were listed on the previous slide, we need to think about what a specific training needs. And of course, everybody comes in from a different background. So, your your wet lab person might have done some dabbling in data analysis, or your bioinformatician might have done some biostatistics or computer science. So you need to sort of think about what is the background of a person, and can you really tailor training to that particular person's needs? But you can do that by thinking about what is a prerequisite for every course that they need to undertake. And then we want to think about building a curriculum. Obviously, there's a generic curriculum. There's certain things that are reasonably generic to multiple different pathogens that you might be focusing on. And then there's the pathogen-specific training curriculum. And then we hope that through this, we'll be able to develop a course plan for each kind of career path. So if you're a bioinformatician and you want to be upskilled in implementing bioinformatics in public health for pathogen surveillance, what is the set of courses that you need to undertake? How do you get there? And what is that career path? Then we also thought about doing the sort of landscaping analysis to see what are existing training courses out there. We know that many people on this in this meeting have been very active in running training courses in the pathogen genomics space. We also have training courses from the manufacturers like Illumina. When they put a machine in, they'll come and do some basic training as well. And so we want to build up this inventory of existing training resources, because of course we don't want to reinvent the wheel if there is existing content or very good courses out there that people can either follow online or actually attend. And then we want to build up a training website with all these resources so that somebody can come and charter this sort of path through a list of available courses. We obviously also need to facilitate training on the phage outputs, as I've mentioned. Make training materials where there are gaps, and align with other relevant training activities. So this shouldn't be done in complete isolation. So we boiled that down into just a set of proposed activities, and I'm going to go through each of these in a bit more detail, but it's basically about maintaining the phage training related website and putting content on there, developing training resources, that's very broad, collating information on what exists, developing standards for pathogen training as well. We've heard a lot about standards, and phage is supposed to also be a standards development organization. So this is to maintain, a certain level of quality when you're doing training, and have competencies being given to the people who've actually attended that training, and have they been assessed to show that those competencies have been acquired. But there are also other aspects around standards for training. And then, of course, support the other phage working groups. So what we've done to date is we have updated the website and done some engagement. We've defined some metadata that needs to be collected when we want to do this sort of landscaping exercise. And then we've developed a survey, and as I said, I'll go through each of these in a bit more detail. So the training and workforce development website at the moment, it's extremely simple. It's this. Not much more than you see here, really just describing what the remit of the workforce development working group is going to do, and the kind of things we're going to undertake. But the idea here is this will be then expanded to provide a list of training materials, provide user guides through those training materials from both the trainer perspective and from the trainee perspective, to build a community of trainers in the pathogen genomics and epidemiology space, particularly for public health. And also just act as kind of a collator of information without trying to have a copy of everything here. So even if we just have to put pointers to it, we don't want to duplicate what is already existing. It's more a matter of drawing attention to it and putting that together. So we've done some engagement with other stakeholders. We've thought about engaging with the different working groups by meeting with working group leaders. So we had a meeting with the ethics working group leaders, and there we discussed, they didn't have any immediate needs for ethics training that they needed from us, but we did discuss how to incorporate ethics and ethics related issues into any proposed training courses that are coming up, or videos or tutorials that are being developed, just to make sure that people are very aware of any ethical issues. We've discussed with the phage infrastructure working group through various email discussions, and because one of my systems administrators on that working group, there's been they've identified a need for systems administrator training. So that's people who are at the local sites who are able to install software, get the workflows and computing infrastructure up and running for analysis of pathogen genomes. And so in H3BioNet, we've actually developed sysadmin how-to guides. So we've got different levels of these guides. So really from starting from scratch, from setting up a Linux server, building a cluster. And so we're making these available, and these can be adapted. But we've also done some sysadmin training, different levels, again, intermediate, beginners and intermediate training. And so we will make all that available. So we integrate, we're working with the infrastructure working group to see how we can support them on that training and building these guides. And then I work with the Africa CDC through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation on an NGS Academy. And this is to provide to build a training program with the Africa PGIs, the Pathogen Genomics Initiatives, which I'm sure Sophonius will talk about later. And that's also involving Christian Happy's group at HGID. And there's a lot of overlap between what we're going to do, because that is setting up the training for these specific institutes that are building, basically want to implement routine NGS sequencing of pathogens. So I know I've mentioned NGS sequencing and genomics quite a lot, and I realize that there are many other activities around pathogen genomic surveillance. But just to, we aim to cover everything that's relevant to public health. So in the main overlap, in fact, with the NGS Academy has been in working on a landscape analysis, because they also are interested in seeing what training materials are out there. So on that topic, we basically built this sort of inventory. So it's basically a list of metadata that we want to collect about courses. So this on the left, you see some of the fields that we're collecting. It includes important information like who's the target audience. You know, there's academic training versus public health training. Somebody who's going to be doing this for a living versus somebody who's going to be doing this to do some research. What is the format of the training? Is it live? Is it recorded lectures? Is it face-to-face? The duration, how is it assessed? Are these materials available? If you run it regularly, is there scope for other people to join? So you can basically build up a list of not only what courses exist, but whether their training materials are available, whether they're openly available, are they applicable to other people outside of the original audience? And if they plan to run the course regularly, what is the timing of those, and can other people join those courses? So this survey is being developed in REDCap to capture all this information, and that was sent out yesterday to a number of stakeholders. So if you haven't seen it and you're interested in filling that in, we'd really like as much information as possible. And this is completely global. We're not restricting this to any continent. Anybody who does pathogen genomics and epidemiology training should fill this in if you can. And then the aim is to collect this information. At the moment, we've just got a spreadsheet listing the organizations we know of and have been engaging with. So we've had several engagements with people who are training in this space, where the content can be found. But this will, of course, all be pulled together, and hopefully we'll have a nice way to navigate this in a user-friendly manner on the website. So then just a comment now on making training fair. So there are different ways. So fair is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And this helps to keep things standardized, but also to make sure that you have enough information. There's nothing more frustrating than finding a course online and then not being able to track down the materials or who's giving the course or what it was designed for. So the aim of making training fair, and that's what we can implement on the PHAGE training working group site, is that we want to make sure you can find information about the training and everything you need to know about the training event. So there's this sort of schemas for training instance, and then the schemas for training materials. So are the training materials, the data sets used in that, the VMs that are used for the software, are those all available somewhere? Even if they're not available, at least the information about them is available. So we want to collect the metadata about the courses. So the metadata should be comprehensive. It should describe the objectives, outcomes, audience. And then hopefully there's a link somewhere to those training materials, including information about how to access them, what is the usage, if there are any usage restrictions, and what are the licensing information for that training materials. And in order to do that, we can map to bioschemas, which is, bioschemas is a much broader set of biologically related schemas, but there's a whole subsection within there for training materials. We've actually annotated all our H3BioNet training materials to bioschemas to make them fair. And then, yeah, we just hope that this will help to guide users to the most suitable courses and content, so that there's no reproduction of work, replication of work. So just to conclude then, the working group is still very new. We only started meeting sort of middle of last year, but we have done some engagement both internally within the phage working groups and externally with stakeholders. And our working group members include a number of stakeholders from around the world. The survey has been sent out. We hope that that's going to provide a lot of information and also identify gaps where we can maybe work with trainers and content providers to build additional content. We want to help facilitate developing and adoption of science for training in public health space. We want to support training and dissemination of the phage standards themselves and their other outputs. Obviously, right now, we've identified an urgent need to support SARS-CoV-2 sequencing training. So we're working on a separate effort with Africa CDC on that. But we hope that our activities will be broadly applicable to multiple different pathogens. So I'd like to thank the phage Secretariat for all their support, the funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and then here's the list of working group members. Thanks to them for all their valuable inputs. We've got 2 brand new members just last week, which I didn't get a chance to put in here. But yeah, I want to thank everybody for the input, and thanks to the organizers of this meeting for the opportunity to talk.